Good evening. Good evening. I didn't expect to see prizes and awards and ceremonies. I've never seen that. I thought maybe I should go before someone asks me to get a round of drinks in. Because I've really had an absolutely fantastic warm welcome, without a doubt. I mean, when I got up this morning and we were out there with my team of Luke and Gary in the corner, we thought, well, there might be a bit of difficulty getting here. Maybe the kind of stars are not with us. Because at 7 o'clock in the morning, as we're trying to approach Manchester Airport, we're stuck in a traffic jam. Well, we managed to wheedle our way through that. And then we got to the airport, and a fog had descended all across Northern Ireland. So for an hour and a half, I waited in the airport. And then when we finally got here, we hear at 11 o'clock that actually the event had been cancelled at the event. So I thought, maybe someone has got it in for us. Perhaps just a tiny little bit. But he didn't realise, I'm not just a wolf in sheep's clothing. That we're a wolf that's leading a pack of UKIP across the northwest and across the country that is deciding to take on the bigots who decide that they don't want to listen to free speech in this country, the bigots who hide behind political correctness, who decide they don't want to hear an alternative view, and the bigots are in that building who receive money from the European Union, which is your money, and don't want to allow anyone to listen to their views, which are your views, and you're paying for it. I've got to admit, I've got to thank you for bringing me back to Northern Ireland for the first time in 20 years, actually. The last time I was here was for a wedding that was in the countryside outside of Belfast. And, I just recall a few things. I remember the warmth of the people, I remember the excitement of the wedding, I remember just vaguely the pubs that we went into. I don't really remember the next day or the day after, or really the day after that. And I think I've got a feeling that actually might happen again tonight. Because I think you've got a lot to celebrate. I think there's an awful lot that you've got to be incredibly proud of. Because in the small group of people that you are, you're growing your party here in Northern Ireland in a short period of time faster than any of the other regions in the country. You have to be proud of yourself that when you've gone through these elections, these general elections, look at the numbers that you managed to achieve. A higher percentage than almost all parts of the country in any specific area. Yes, we had successes with Tim Aker down in the eastern region. Yes, we got 4 million votes across the country, which you are part of. Yes, we're the start of a movement that when you knock on every single door, or when you're actually walking down the street, as I did in Stockport, where I stood, and you saw people winding down the windows, shouting, "I'm voting UKIP." Or when you have people coming out your door saying, "I want to get leaflets." Have you in any other political party that's ever had that sort of excitement and energy across the country? And you should be immensely proud that you're part of UKIP, you're part of history, you're part of something that is immense change in this country. You are part of it, so be very proud of yourself for exactly that. But I was also in the car coming today, and I was warned about doing jokes in Northern Ireland, particularly when you're a Manc. I mean, there are not actually that many famous Mancunian comedians. But I do remember being at the wedding, and I was being there with a Sikh accountant friend of mine, who said, "Stephen, I was once doing a deal with a Sikh businessman who was in Northern Ireland. And he said he went to this factory that she bought, and he wanted to impress the kind of staff, and so he brought them all together. And he was giving them the pep talk about how well he's going to build this business, how much he's going to take it forward, bringing in jobs and energy. When a voice picked up in the corner, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, forgive the accent, but I'll try my best." He said, "Excuse me, sir, what religion are you?" And the chap looked around, with a massive orange, turban on his head, and his partner's there with a similar one. I said, "It doesn't really matter. I'm not sure that's an important question. Because I'm going to bring the capital in, we're going to work together as a team, and we're going to be excited and build this business." I said, no. I said, what religion are you? The guy said, "Is it really that important?" Yes. He said, "Well, as you can see from this turban on my head, I'm a Sikh, as is my partner." And the chap turned around and said, "Yes, but are you a Catholic Sikh or a Protestant Sikh?" Well, you have a history of that. And I look at my family. I have a black American grandfather. I've got an Irish Catholic grandmother from County Kildare in her head. I have a Jewish grandmother. I have an English grandfather who fought in the Second World War for us. I probably caused more problems when my mother divorced and had a second husband who came from Ballymena, William Cogan, or as I'm told, William Cogan. Is that right? Because I've been pronouncing it wrong for all of these years. We can tell you what it's going to be like at Christmas with all those different things. It's an exciting period. And what I had with Bill Cogan, who left these shores at the age of 14 and a half, and he went to work in England. He went through an apprentice scheme. He went through jobs and succeeded and eventually became a printer in Stockport. At the age of 54, he lost his job under the Thatcher years as the impact of the European Union's policies from coal and steel and the way that they were starting to introduce a sort of policy of economics there that drove out small and medium-sized businesses by allowing the big corporates to take over. But he was a very proud man, a very humorous man. Now my grandmother also came over at the age of 14. She worked for the nuns in Manchester as a cleaner first of all. She eventually met my grandfather, fell in love, had children, including my mother. My grandmother loved my mother. My grandfather loved my mother. They both loved me. But something they also loved. They loved Britain. They loved the family around them. They loved the culture and the people there. They loved everything about the freedom to be able to sit and work and save and live together. They loved every aspect of their neighbourhood and the people were there. And that neighbourhood, that freedom, that Britain is what we have today, and the European Union are trying to take it away from us, and I am not going to let them and their memories and their love for this country and this nation go aside without fighting for us, and I hope you're not as well. Because I know both my father-in-law, stepfather and my grandmother will be very proud of me standing here today. They'd be proud that I've come across this little distance of water to share our views and our visions with people who also share those views and visions. The fact that we believe that we are a great nation and that we don't need to be subsumed into an organisation run by unelected dictators and unelected civil servants. We don't need to be part of an organisation that gives us 75 or 78 or 79 or 80% of the laws when we know that we want our lawmakers to make the laws decided by ourselves. But they'll be proud that I'm standing here in front of an audience of people who also share their values and their principles. And it comes down to a lot of things about the European Union that we can talk about. You know, first of all, I remember an element of a farmer that once said he saw in the distance a car coming across the hills and there was dust speeding up along it. And suddenly, out in front, this very flash, top of the range, Italian car pulls into him and screeches up, dust comes around. And the farmer looks as this man gets out of the car, perfect Italian suit, kind of Gucci glasses, slick back hair. You can smell the aroma as it approached him from a mile away. He's got massive, expensive watch on his arm, and he comes to the farmer and he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Farmer, if I tell you how many animals you've got in that field, can I take one of those cows with me?" And the farmer looks at him and says, "Well, yeah, sure, why not? You can take that." So the man goes to his car, pulls out the latest top-of-the-range Apple, flips it open, gets his computer connected in to the top-of-the-range phone, taps in distances, gets the coordinates of where we are, goes up to the satellite gets down to Germany, in Dusseldorf, they work out what the satellite distance, send it back to his phone, pulls out a printer prints out a lovely, beautiful picture of the farm, the land, the layout, and all the animals, and he says, "You have 1,471. The farmer says, "My God, you've got it exactly right." He said, "Can I take my prize?" "Of course you can." So the man wheels over, tries to get the cow, and he's pushing it into the back of the car. But the farmer says, "Excuse me, if I can tell you what your job is, can I have my animal back?" And the man looks at him and says, "Oh, bien sûr, of course. You'll never guess." And he says, "Absolutely, I can. You're a European Commissioner." And the man says, "How did you know?" He says, "Well, first of all, you came here uninvited and never asking any questions before. You turn up in the latest fast equipment, all expenses paid by someone other than yourself. You ask me questions to which answers I already knew, but questions I didn't want asked in the first place. You know nothing about me. You know nothing about farming. You know nothing about animals, because can I have my sheepdog back, please? Now, ladies and gentlemen, we might have little jokes about the European Union, but it is much more serious. And you here in Northern Ireland are going to bear the brunt, to a certain extent, of this Brexit referendum that we face. Because you cannot be overlooked. You are an important part of this referendum, because in this country there are lots of people who understand what change is about. You have gone through a period of change that was significant. You had to fight to get your freedoms to be able to live in a modicum of peace from a period of time that was not peace. You are like those in history that have managed to get their independence and yet can see that it can be lost. But you're also important because you're part of an organised country that's next to a country that will want to oppose this referendum and this Brexit. And they're going to have an eye on you as they are on us. And that is the Republic of Ireland. It's already very clear over the last few days that we see that the Republic of Ireland politicians are ganging up together to form a coalition to actually create fear in the minds of those who are their family and friends in England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland, and Wales. They're already trying to create fear that there will be a loss of trade between our countries, when of course there will not be. Why would there be any loss of trade with Britain and the European Union when Germany sells more to Britain than any other country in the world? We are their most important market. Why would the European Union stop trade with the United Kingdom when again we are more important in trade than China, Hong Kong, and to an extent America added together? But the Irish politicians are going to create fear. They're going to create fear that you've got family and friends in there who will never be able to cross borders or be able to come across as freely as they are now. What fear they should be saying to their people is fear of what happens if the Republic of Ireland stays in the European Union. A country that has seen a private debt of French and German banks converted to a public debt to be paid for by the Irish children and grandchildren of the future if they're lucky. They shouldn't be saying fear about Britain leaving the European Union when they have fear of their own country's debt that is now controlled and their own policies controlled by the European Union. They need to have it sought and signed off every single year. Do you want your country to be signed off by unelected dictators every year? I don't think we do. And they should be fearful that their economy can be destroyed because right now, at this moment in time, the European Union is seeking to achieve a single corporation tax in which they decide how much the businesses, small and large, pay. How will Ireland survive if they have to raise their corporation level taxes to that of France or Greece or Italy or Portugal? But let me make this clear to those politicians in Ireland. The British people, those in Northern Ireland, will not tolerate interference from any Republic of Ireland politician. This is our referendum, not yours.
Here, here.
Here. Stop bringing fear into this debate, because the argument of our historic ties will be frazzled and broken. The British people will not forgive you if you interfere in our referendum and bring fear into it, and nor should we. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that leaving the European Union should be a period of hope and aspirations for ourselves. It should be a time when we can start unleashing hope and aspiration of our children and our grandchildren. Hope and aspirations of our businesses who are going to be freed from the large amount of EU regulation that they have to face. 90% of our businesses are not trading in Europe, but 100% of our businesses have to comply with EU regulations. If we want to slowly fade away in a European Union whose economic prowess is declining year on year, who used to have great GDP at 22 and 24% when we joined the EU and turned to 14% by 2020, then let's stay in. The Irish politicians fail to understand that. But those here in Northern Ireland understand, with the education system that you've got, with the people who are energetic and vibrant and bright, that the world is our oyster. Although there's some pretty good oysters down the bottom end of there and up here. But we have a great opportunity because we're also aware of the damage the EU has done. How many of you remember the great fishing fleets that came out of Northern Ireland? Now many of us knew the great fishing fleets that came out of Grimsby. 80% of our waters are owned by us, but now we only sell 20% of the fish, or at least only allowed to fish 20% of the stock. How many of us love to have the post office and be able to meet your neighbours there? But we now know, under various postal directives, 3 of them, that our post offices have closed and our postal services are declining. And what about those in the big factories, like we're seeing now in Redcar? 1,700 people losing their jobs because the cost of electricity has risen because we now have to build wind farms that they don't want and subsidise them for the duty. Every one of your families in here, every single household, will be £400 better off a year if we weren't in the European Union on gas and electricity bills alone. If we left the European Union and didn't have to pay the common agricultural policy, every family in this country would be £150 better off. And our farmers would be better served because you have governments who understand their needs much more, and if they needed subsidies and able to help and compete with those big corporate interests, we would be able to do so. These are the reasons why we must leave the European Union. But there's one other thing that's more important to me. Someone who's born in Manchester, and I used to get the 50 bus up into Manchester, and outside of the 50 bus stop, just as you park in front of the library there was a cross. A cross that represented people that died at the Peterloo Massacre. And the Peterloo Massacre, 15 people died, including a couple of children, simply because they were on a stage asking for the vote. In Merthyr Tydfil, 32 people were killed in the early 1800s as they stood up against the elites in our own country, simply because they asked for the vote. The suffragettes were beaten outside our own parliament, simply for asking for the vote for women. And in 1969, every single one of us, man and woman aged 18, got that vote where we could choose our own electorate, where we could choose our own politicians. And in 1969, the elites handed it over to the European Union. Was that a plan to take away the powers that we have? Now let's look back at history. In Chester, where I live, you get down the M6, get onto the M42, and there is a little village called Belfast. I don't know if many of you have ever heard of Belfast. Just like in Manchester, there is a plaque there. And it's a plaque that commemorates a significant part of the history and fight of ordinary working men and women to get freedom in our country. And on that plaque, it celebrates something that's not taught in our schools anymore. And there are 3 names on that, and I'm going to read them out. Cornet James Thompson, Corporal Perkins, and John Church. Now these 3 men were soldiers in the New Model Army. The New Model Army had come together of ordinary people that decided they wanted to get rid of a dictator king in Charles I. They worked with a leader in terms of Cromwell. They fought with him. They saw their friends die alongside them, and eventually they got rid of the king. But they also believed in a group of people that were radical, who believed in universal suffrage, who believed that every man and woman deserved the right to have a vote, who believed that we should all be treated equally, that you should have court cases judged by 12 men and women true. Those are values that we have today. But oddly enough, someone like Cromwell didn't like it. He didn't like this idea anymore, and he chased them down. And he cornered them in Belfast, inside this church. And he demanded that every one of these people who wanted freedom, democracy, and liberty come out of the church, and they forsake these heretical views of freedom. Heretical views of freedom. Well, those three men, Cornet James Thompson, Corporal Perkins, and John Church, unlike the others, didn't come out and renege their heretical views. What they did is they stood strong. And for that, they were killed. Like those in Merthyr Tydfil, like those in Peterloo, they died so that we can sit in this room today and listen to our own views. So that organisations who have been receiving funding from the European Union should have the opportunity to listen to our views. And they've ignored that. And that is why in this year we also celebrate Magna Carta, where people also died so that we can live in freedom. It's also why we celebrate the Battle of Britain and those soldiers who got up, many of them young, who got into planes and to take out and fight against a German dictatorship who wanted to control their lives, even though they knew it could be their certain death. Those men stood up, and they died simply because of the freedom. Now take a look around in this room. Are we now under threat of our own democracy and freedom by an unelected dictatorship in Europe? Are we not aware of those people who have risked their lives in wars and before us? Are you going to ignore what they have done? Or are you going to get up during this referendum, get up on yourselves and say, I am going to stand on those street corners, I'm going to knock on people's doors, because I know how many people died to allow me to speak freely in this country, because I know I bloody well am, and if you're not, I think you should just leave and get out now. Yeah. This is a great nation, built on the backs of the working people who fought hard to ensure that we had an NHS, a free education service, a court system that should be treated equally, that we have an armed service that should be funded to enable that we could defeat those ISIL terrorists and people who want to bring the terrorism to our land. That is why we fight hard in here. A great nation of Wellington and Nelson, of Elizabeth I, of Churchill, or people like my grandfather, who without hesitation, understanding the dangers coming to his country, got on, fought with his soldiers and went into the sands of Africa and fought against those German dictators. And he risked his lives to do so. And that is why we should all come together. It doesn't matter whether it's left or right anymore. It doesn't matter whether it's Conservative or Labour or the other parties here. We should be getting out there and persuading our neighbours that this is about something much more fundamental. That this is not political anymore. This is about something that sits in our hearts and our souls, and that we should be fighting together, all together, to ensure that our children and our grandchildren are not going to be controlled by an elites and unelected rooms, but have the opportunity to have the freedoms and understand the history that came behind them. So I'm going to say to you, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for you to do something that those people have stood before. You're not going to go into a church and be asked to stand out and be shot. The most I'm going to get is an insulting organisation saying I'm barred. I might get called, as I did in London, someone of mixed race, a fake black, an Oreo, a coconut. Well, I can live with that, because people died for the freedom for me to even face you calling me a fake black, an Oreo, or a coconut. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get up, let's tweet, let's Facebook, let's get on our neighbours' doors, let's stand on street corners, let's deliver leaflets, but let's be proud of who we are, proud of our country, proud of our heritage, and proud that we are the only party fighting to leave the European Union. That is why I'm here, and that's why you should be there as well.